Hey everyone, and welcome to this bonus update episode for our season one of Real Conversations with INFJs and INFPs. My name is Merja Amelia. I'm here with Emilia. And before we jump into our introductions, thank you for joining us on today's session, and thank you for making the request for this, because of course today we're talking about the 2021 experience, which relates to the 2020 experience, which I think was our first episode for this podcast way back when in season one. So here we are again.
So Merja here is an INFJ and is the governing elder of the Sumalov Academy of Human Integration. The Sumalov Academy is an online safe house where members can carry out their healing and development journey together with others. Merja is a master integration mentor, a certified MBTI practitioner, and an author of personal development courses. When she is not busy with work, which seems like all the time, she is spending time with her partner, Peter, and their collection of beloved dogs and horses.
Thanks, Emilia. And of course, you all probably know Emilia already, who is an INFJ. Emilia is a transformation mentor who helps driven and ambitious people live the life that they want to live. And with her work, Emilia helps her clients to finally move on from what is holding them back to feeling more like themselves. Now, Emilia here, of course, is a fully qualified integration mentor. And her work is so inspirational to me because she loves helping clients to really become who they are. And her work's been featured in many magazines, podcasts, and other forms of media. And she's currently writing a book teaching people how to confront trauma's 12 most common lies, or 12 common lies. This is such important work. And when it comes out, I hope, Emilia, you'll let us know about that so that we can spread the word. When she's not working, Emilia is doing her own personal development and spending a lot of time in her garden, reading, cooking, and as a fellow dog lover, she walks her dog on her spare time. So, Emilia, it's great to be here with you today. I'm so happy that our audience wanted to hear an updated version from 2021. Oh my goodness, I'm looking back. It's now mid-April 2022, and I'm looking back at 2021 thinking, what happened?
Seems like a long time ago, especially as COVID was wearing on and the end of the Trump era and moving into just a different time. It seems like a long time ago. In reality, it's not that long ago.
Yeah, that's right. And at my in my sphere of focus, if you like, we've moved away from the political upheaval in the US and more into the horrible situation that is going on in Ukraine right now, where 55 million people who to a very large degree are innocent bystanders are now paying the ultimate price for independence and freedom, with the threat of Russia now starting to move into Poland and Finland, where we've really seen what the upheaval in the US between 2016 and 2020, and certainly the conduct between US and Russia in that time, say Helsinki 2018, how it has emboldened the Russian leader to take these actions of crimes against humanity in Ukraine. So it's been very interesting to see from 2020 here in 2022, world is now starting to open up, and but we're still working, we're still having to clean up what happened way back when. So that's kind of my big thought right now, but let's teleport to 2020 or 2021 even, because last year we did an overview on 2020. Let's do the 2021 now and look at the micro level. So if you had to, let's look at the macro level first. If you had to give one word to 2021, I know this can be potentially a big question. What would you say, Emilia? 2021, one word.
The word that came to me was ongoing. I think so many people were ready for normalcy and were over COVID restrictions. They were tired of having to keep getting masks. They were tired of, and whatever your political stance is, it's just, I think everyone was just getting tired of it. It's like compassion fatigue was happening, I think, to all of us, with just wanting to move on to our normal lives. So I think that's the one word that comes to me about 2021. How about you, Merja?
My one word is really two words, and it's mental health. I spoke to a lot of mental health professionals for work, for personal conversations throughout 2021, and they all agree, therapists, counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, all agree that 2021 and coming into 2022, a lot of people, even people who didn't have psycho-emotional issues, started showing certain levels of distress, and largely because of a lot of the unknowns. We didn't know. We were told, you know, in terms of some leaders and certainly, you know, some people whom I directly hold accountable for loss of lives, that COVID would just magically disappear by Easter or whatever the message was, way before even of that. You know, it wasn't a realistic. So many people were lied about the realism of the situation. You know, we're talking about global pandemic, and we can't be insular. We can't say this only affects our country, because it doesn't. This is worldwide. And so also the mental health issues were worldwide phenomena, because everywhere in the world, people were struggling, and everywhere in the world, people had to create almost like what's a new normal way of caring for yourself to manage the anxiety, the distress, the stress, sometimes depression. So for me, mental health was the one word, two words.
Yeah. And that's a great 2 words for the 1 word question that you asked.
Right.
So looking back, it was a challenging year for a lot of people. Businesses closed, a lot of restaurants closed here in Kansas City, on top of other restaurants, people needing help. What did you think about the positives of 2021? What did you see as coming out of that?
That's a really good question. And there were so many, I think we asked this question 2020 when we did the 2020 video. I think we asked the same question, and I think my answer back then was a lot more hopeful than now, what it is now, in terms of, or more energetic or positive in terms of we can do this and we're gonna get this and that. And as everything wore on, I've come to realize that the positives that have come from 2021 are extreme ownership, like real ownership of our issues. You know, we can't pretend like things aren't there anymore. And I know a lot of people are trying very, very hard to do that. And a lot of people, you know, struggled with alcohol abuse and substance abuse in that time. And there was elevated levels of suiciding and so on. And that's really tough. And I don't in any way want to minimize any of that struggle. And with that sword comes the second edge, which is we have to face how psycho-emotionally vulnerable we have been as human race, how we have not had to be strong. You know, you look at the leadership, say, in Ukraine right now, the Ukrainian president, Zelensky, he was a comedian, right? He was an actor. And he played, you probably know this, of course, everybody probably knows this at this stage, but he played a Ukrainian president in a TV show, a president who was a teacher who stood against corruption. And then he actually ran on that platform in real life and got elected. So we've seen people shift from unexpected places into these spaces of leadership because they took that responsibility, they took that extreme ownership of the situation and wanted to be a part of the solution rather than a part of the problem. And that's not to negate anybody's psycho-emotional distress or if you can't do things. It's not a commentary on that. This is a commentary on the positives that have come in some instances from this global situation that we've had going on for years now at this stage. What about you? What are some positives from your end that you've noticed?
I think globally, although it can be easy to see all the negatives and feel all the uncertainty and wonder when will life get better, I think there are positive things that are happening if we can look for them. For example, people are working from home more. It seems like the shift from employees feeling like they actually have power over their workplace. I found that really amazing, of being like, no, I want to spend more time at home. This is what makes me happy. I don't have to be a slave to you. And seeing the response of that and people needing to pay more for their employees. You know, people need to respect their workforce more. And I thought that was an amazing step forward because, you know, people have changed significantly what they're looking for. And the fact that it is a massive wake-up call. So that has given me hope. I think that people are hopefully remembering that although there's political differences between people, people are still people. People still have feelings, similar things that they can relate on. And hopefully that was a reminder for people in 2021, especially when the compassion fatigue was going on, especially with the nurses and the doctors who were having to deal with wave after wave of COVID, especially after the vaccines were coming up. And I don't want to get too political here, but I do see, I think, people starting to feel more powerful in certain ways that they didn't feel before. And to me, that has been a very interesting shift from the pandemic. Like the last pandemic we had in 1917, that something that came from that was the sewer system was developed.
That's right.
They didn't have the sewer system, and from that, the sewer system actually, they needed the sewer system going forward. So there are good things that can happen from this if we can keep our eyes open for it, and if we can remember to look for those. Agreed.
And the sewer system was actually developed way back when, but then it was like way before then, but it was forgotten. And I think that we also have had this amnesia of things that we need to do for ourselves, to look after ourselves and to look after other people. And I think you're right in terms of it. We will something will come out of this that will make a difference. So yeah, so something positive will come out, and as you were talking, I felt like we also have to make the effort to look for the positives, because the human mind is wired to look for the negatives, to look at the things that are wrong. So how can we balance that a little bit and wire ourselves to also see what's right? So I want to be really clear. This is not to pretend like everything's okay. This is to create balance in what we're experiencing, because our minds are hardwired to look for problems. So yeah.
Especially if we're having a hard time, especially if things feel heavy, especially with all of this stuff. Like, I personally have just been going through a hard time of feeling quite lost. And today was the first time in a long time that I'm like, oh, I've had a lot of fun today. And it's just amazing how much changes in your feelings can shift your mood, shift your outlook, shift these things. So it's fascinating for me to see how much those of us deep feelers, how much that impacts us. And then also, how do you regulate that so it doesn't give you a lot of biased reality around you? Right.
Biased reality, also known as delusion at times, because we do tend to buy into our own story. We're so invested in our own story that we can buy into it, positive or negative. We can think that things are worse than they are, or we can think that things are better than they actually are. And how do we find, where's that balance? And I think that balance is just intentionally noticing when things go right, and intentionally noticing when things aren't going as well as they could be, and then looking for help.
Yeah, and I think there's another side of the coin as well, of looking at what we feel like is going to happen and attach ourselves to this reality, and then building the stories up from that, which intuitives can easily do. And then also on the flip side of, I feel like this is going to happen, so then we start believing it. So keeping a handle on these two little boogers.
100%. So what was it like inside of your head in 2021?
So 2021, I had some massive shifts, mostly in the later season of 2021, where I believe we need to work on what we're presented with right now. And during that season, I worked on changing my value, feeling like I was lovable, feeling like I have worth, and understanding that it was time to actually have these pieces come together. Versus I think a lot of people feel like, oh, you need to feel like you are worthy. Well, if you don't know who you are, then feeling like you're worthy is going to be really challenging, because you need to figure out who you are. You need to figure out some other stuff along the way before you can get to the point that you feel like you're worthy. So it was nice for me to start to connect and put those pieces together, because those change who I attract when I'm dating. They change what I tolerate and what I don't tolerate. They change what I think about myself. And all of these things, if you do them effectively, they will level you up. So they will change what you tolerate. It's just another level of that. So that was like that. And then also, as you learn these different lessons, you have to look at and start seeing how you're playing this out right now. It's like you're blind to it, and then you learn it, and then you're like, oh my gosh, and you start seeing it, and then you have to deal with consciously seeing it, which isn't fun either, because it's always, it's not the prettiest thing to see how we are holding ourselves back. So that's what my mind was like in early 2021, or sorry, later 2021. I feel like that was the major highlights of that, but it was super important for me.
Yeah. It's so important to allow the outside world to show what we're not aware of. And then when we get that opportunity, if we can recognize a pattern. So if we get the same message from different sources, say 2 or 3 times or more, it's time to look at what am I actually believing that's bringing this about. For example, in people's, like, like you mentioned that you were, am I lovable? And then, so if you start to get that reflection from people around you that you are in fact lovable. Now, I'm not talking about your process here because your process is yours to talk about, but having worked with some clients in the past with the similar challenge, is that they don't believe. Somebody tells you, hey, you're lovable. You don't believe it. You're like, what does this person want from me, right? So you start to kind of create a story, and then when it comes from different sources, then it's good to listen. If those sources have nothing to gain to give you the message, it's good to listen. So whatever anybody's challenge is, that the world is sending you the same message time and time again, maybe there's something to it.
Yeah, and then also, how do you break that? That's my thing. It's like, yeah, I see this message, but how do you break it?
Well, I was actually going to talk about in what was it like inside my head, and I was at that breaking stage. Like, I was at that, how do you break this? So last year, 2021, I became painfully aware of the fact that I am too generous. And I have, this about me, Emilia, I think I have a real generosity of spirit. I would just like people to bring everything they have on the table and share it as much as they feel comfortable doing, but do it consciously. So I'm like the ultimate socialist. And for those of you who don't know, if you just got a really little thing in your heart that says socialism is bad, you should look it up, actually, from countries where, I grew up in a democratic socialist society. So check that out, what it actually means, not what you think it means. So, because I'm tired of explaining it, frankly. And this is now you can see that I'm no longer too generous, because I'm not spending the next 15 minutes explaining what it is to people who don't want to hear what it is. Check it out. So I'm a highly devoted giving person. And the challenge that comes with that is that people get used to you being that giving person. And you also do attract certain type of people to whom it suits that you're a giving person. Yeah. And I had to come to the conclusion that that the level of devotion that I feel comfortable with in relationships, in work relationships, personal relationships, friendships, business relationships, that it's an unusual level of devotion, because my devotion is toward the end result, which is a more compassionate and effective world for the future generations. And doing things together is important to me. And I had 2 people whom I highly trust and respect tell me that this is what I'm doing. Can you see you're doing it here? Whether it was with friends or with, business or with work or whatever it was. Do you see that this is what's happening? And I got cognitive dissonance from it. I didn't accept it. I had no idea. So the first step in how do you change it is you have to be comfortable, or you have to ask yourself, do I have cognitive dissonance around this? Is this information coming from people that I trust and respect, that have nothing to gain for me to change my, they're doing it for me, not for themselves. They're telling me this because they want to see me do better. not because they want to be doing better for themselves through me. And so that's the first thing. You need to really examine where that information is coming from, and then be okay to be in cognitive dissonance and say, there's a possibility that I've been wrong for a really long time about this, and I've done something that's not conducive to me for a really long time, and I don't know what the answer is. And that's one of the most horrifying things for people, is to not know. So how do you break it? You look for feedback from people that you trust and respect, and you're willing to just take it on the chin, and ask for help if you start struggling, if your mental health starts deteriorating, because that can happen with this work. You can go into depression, or you can get into high anxiety and so on. That was certainly the case in my case as well. Ask for help, look for help, but don't back down when it comes to being your own biggest supporter. And that's how you break that particular pattern. You have to have a certain level of stubbornness to keep going, a certain level of humility to ask for help, and a certain level of, I think, visualization of how hard it is to break through that eggshell for that little bird to get through, but we will. So that was pretty much my 2021, was coming to terms with the fact that whilst I'm a very strong person, I've had a massive blind spot in letting people to take advantage of me.
Yeah. Yep. And you're very giving and you're very kind. And isn't it interesting what our blind spots can do to us? Because we all have them. And you who are listening to this, you will likely have your own. And blind spots are so frustrating, because it's like you have these invisible barriers and you can't see what's going on. And then all of a sudden your life isn't working. You don't know what it is.
And you don't know why. And oftentimes when that happens, especially if we're introverts, and INFJs and INFPs obviously are, we turn inward to try and resolve the problem, when in fact, if we had the tools to resolve the problem already, we wouldn't be in this predicament. So we have to ask for help. There's no way forward without asking for help, or looking for outside influence that's positive.
Yeah, it's like you're looking for something that you're blind to, and no matter how many times you loop, no matter how many things you try to connect, you're still going to be blind to it.
Yeah,
because you just can't see it.
Like colorblind people, red and green. Well, certain color blindness, red and green looks the same color. So there's no point trying to differentiate which is red and which is green, because you can't unless somebody else tells you this is red, this is green.
A friend of mine is a contractor, and he's colorblind, and he painted the exterior of a house that he was flipping. And I was very excited to see the house. It was his first time flipping, and he's a friend of mine, and I show up and he's colorblind, and there are colors on the exterior of the house that look terrible, because he was colorblind and wasn't realizing that he was painting the house colors that didn't look so good.
Yeah.
The realtor made him change colors. So yeah, we are all blind, and it's costly to us.
And isn't it amazing that the realtor came and said, no, we're not going to go with that color, whatever that color is there. We're going to go with something else. And then if he trusted this realtor, then great, because it's, the realtor wants you to do well. So that's a perfect example, actually.
It is.
I love it. I love it.
So as we're talking about the inside of our mind, what I think is so interesting as introverts is no one knows the inside and the thoughts and the state of your mind. So it's cool that as an introvert, it's literally your own space.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to talk about these thoughts that we think, because I think it normalizes them. It shows other people that they might be thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting, how do you deal with those? So what voices were you hearing in 2021, especially with the cognitive dissonance and the not being really quite sure if people were telling you the truth? And the challenge, I think, with cognitive dissonance is not being really quite sure to see it.
What is the truth? Yeah. You don't know what's a fact and what's somebody's opinion, right?
So can you talk more about what those voices were saying and how you dealt with them, if you can remember?
Yeah, I actually very vividly remember, which is great, because I've also been found to have a brain injury since early this year. So my short to medium term memory has been a bit patchy in the past, but now I'm on the right track. I'm on the right supplementation, and I'm getting healthier, which is great. But I do remember this, and I think it was because it was such an important, like, fundamental struggle that I had last year. And the main voice, the main positive voice was, you know, you're on the right track. But the main negative voice was saying, it's not such a big deal, just let it slide. They'll learn the lesson. And that was my big thing, is just, oh, it's not a big deal. You know, they'll get it on their own. You don't have to say anything. What a mistake that was. So those were the two voices that, like, on one hand, I had a really grounded voice saying, you're on the right track, keep going. And then on the other hand, and I could have misinterpreted that as the other voice being right, which was, oh, it's not a big deal. But it was a big deal, and I had to write it out. And I had to address it. I had to learn. I had to get to enough pain or a big enough or serious enough situation to change, to actually look at it. And that's something that did happen consequently. Yeah. So those were the main two kind of voices that I had around that challenge. And I wonder, you know, you mentioned the what was going on inside your head as well, and I wondered the same thing. You know, what were some of the voices that were showing up? What were they saying? How were they, like, guiding you, and guiding in air quotes, because, like, thanks for the guidance, but I'm done with that now.
Yeah, biased guidance can easily throw you off, and it's so tricky because it's, if you have an unexamined thought. So if you are an introvert and you have all these thoughts rolling around, and if you don't have someone else kind of checking to make sure, like, are these thoughts helping me? Are these thoughts helpful? Are these thoughts, like, actually what's going on? Then you're going to keep playing those thoughts over and over again, and then you wonder why you keep getting into the same results and the same situations. It's because you're listening to yourself and these thoughts that are steering you off course, and the only way to get them checked to see, are these thoughts helpful or not, is to have somebody who you trust, who understands you, who is both gentle and willing to hear you, help you realize and start looking at them, because it can make a world of difference for your inner world, rather than you tripping over yourself with these corroded thought patterns that you have.
That's a really good way of putting it. Corroded thought patterns. It's like drinking dirty water and wondering why you're getting sick. You know, that's what those corroded thoughts, it's like oxygen and iron, you know, when they get triggered with each other in a certain way, they create rust. And it's the same. It's like our brain can get oxidized in that way, where we just stay on that one track of here's what the fact is, when in fact it might not be the fact at all. It might just be our perception of what's going on. Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. So what were the voices actually telling you around, because you highlighted the lovable piece, and I think a lot of our listeners are curious to see what the voices were around that and what you did about that, because that's a great transformation that I know a lot of INFJs and INFPs struggle with.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge and the most helpful piece with that is knowing the inner child work of what voice is telling me I'm not lovable, especially when you get to a point of it's time for this to change. And you're like, I'm lovable, and this voice is like, no, I'm not. What do you do with that? What do you deal with that?
Yeah.
So for an INFJ, I knew that I had this 10-year-old who's a thinker, who knows and thinks it knows best. And I have this 3-year-old inner child who's very sweet, who looks at all this information and says, these are all the reasons why you're not lovable. So I knew I either had to change the information that my 3-year-old's getting and help her see what she's missing, or I knew I had to start outthinking my thinking 10-year-old and ask her enough questions to make her realize that she doesn't know everything. And just through that process, I was able to change it. And that's one cool thing about your work, Merja, is you can get to these points that you know what to do with these voices that go, no, you're not. I don't believe this. You're not good enough. They stop defining you, and you know how to break them down to where you can get to a point that they stop speaking up. And then as you stop speaking up, they believe you, and then your reality changes, and it's like you level up, and then all of a sudden you're looking around, you're like, life's different, and different things are coming to you, and then you attract different partners, and then you're saying things differently, and then you're making more money, and then it's just naturally coming to you, and you're looking around, you're like, what's going on? And it's because these inner children have changed.
It is because the inner children have changed, but it's also because you've worked your strengths or your, adult self and your inner parent in the outside world simultaneously, which is important too, because we can't just attend to the inner children. Unfortunately, not many of us have the luxury of just hanging out with the inner children and chilling with them. And I look at your work, and you've done so beautifully. You've done the two things, which is attend to your inner children and to also do what needs to be done in the outside world. There are specific parts of your professional life in particular that I'm really, really, as your friend, not as your mentor, as your friend, really proud of you for achieving. My God, like, it's so inspiring. So you've done, you're right. You your inner children relax and you level up, and you're like, well, life looks a little bit different from here. Like, what do I do with this now? And then you can get quite, like, your grown-ups, your inner grown-ups can start to get a little bit confused, going like, yeah, I need to do something about that. And then you start, working through those as well. So, but it's important to take a moment and enjoy the leveling up experience, because otherwise there's always more to be done, right? There's always more to be done. And I wanted to jump in there. Sorry?
Go for it.
Okay. I wanted to jump in and just say about the INFPs, our INFP listeners as well, for this particular podcast, because their inner children are also a thinker and a sensor, but the orientation is different and the position is different. So for our INFP listeners, shout out to you. Good to see you all. Your 10-year-old inner child, of course, is the executive, the outward thinker, and your 3-year-old inner child is the historian, which is inward sensing. So the challenges that the INFPs can have with this combination is that sorry, I was just talking to an ENFP earlier today, so I've just flipped everything. So your 10-year-old is inward sensing, the historian, and your 3-year-old is outward thinking, which is the executive. My apologies. But the challenge is still the same. You still have a thinker and a sensor in there, and because the sensor is facing inward and looking back at what's happened before, the sensor is traumatized in the INFP, can find a really difficult time to try and climb out of that. So trying to show that 10-year-old inner child historian how things are actually going well and what good things are happening, even though bad things have happened in the past. We can start morphing that historian into a fantastic, solid, step-by-step driver of our life into the right direction. But we need to give that inner child that direction, that they're able to do it, the skills, but also the confidence that they can. So there's challenges, and I think a lot of INFPs can also relate to the executive inner child, the outward thinker, 3-year-old inner child, inferior function, where that part thinks they know what the most effective way of doing something is. But in fact, the most effective thing for an INFP is to listen to how they feel about something and do what they believe is right in their hearts. So, bit of a power struggle there potentially. But yeah, it's a big deal, and attending to those inner children opens a whole different world of treasures. So I'd be ready to wrap this update up on that high note, because I know that a lot of people have felt a lot of bad things about 2021, a lot of struggles. But for me, if I now, having spoken with you about this, Emilia, and I feel really grateful for having had this time with you, if I had to give it one word, if I would have to give 2021 one word, I would say hope, actually.
It's an interesting shift from earlier.
That is an interesting shift, yeah. 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 Any shifts for you before we wrap up? Or are you just, no, I'm still the same.
I'm exactly the same. Very grateful to have you, Merja. I want to do this again. Pleasure speaking with you as always. And hopefully people got value out of this. You know, Merja's work is incredible. So if you are wanting some help, please reach out to her. She can hold you very softly with her work. So
thank you, Emilia, much appreciated. And I can't wait to get that book of yours in my hands. So I want to get it right. So it is the Confront Trauma's 12 Common Lies. And whether that's going to be the final title, everybody keep an eye on Emilia Harshfield here, because there is some incredible trauma related work that, Emilia, you're doing on a day-to-day basis. You're very generously sharing it with the rest of us, and everyone keep an eye out for that. And I hope to do an interview with you once the book comes out. That would be awesome. That would be great. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to have you on the Sumilof.com platform to share some of your wisdom.
Yeah, that would be fun. Looking forward to it.
Okay. Well, thank you, Emilia. Thanks for your time. I hope to catch up with you soon again with this work. Such a pleasure working with you. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to today's bonus sesh for season 1 of Real Conversations with INFJs and INFPs. If you haven't checked out season 2 yet, do. It's all about stress and our bodies, so how stress manifests in our bodies. So it's quite an interesting set of conversations as well. And then let's keep doing our work. Let's keep empowering ourselves. Let's believe that there is a light inside of us that needs to shine, and make it our life's work to find ways to let that light out. And you've certainly done that today, Emilia, for us, and continue to do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll see you at the next interview episode. We'll see you on Facebook. We'll see you at summaloft.com. We'll see you wherever we'll see you. But look after yourselves and take care. Bye for now.